We're just 2 days away from opening day, so it's time to, for the final time, project which 26 players will be heading to Toronto with the Orioles. That's coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, March 25th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, I'm going to give my final prediction for the Orioles 2025 opening day roster, which 13 hitters and 13 pitchers will go north to Toronto for Thursday's opening day. We'll walk through the pitching situation and get you some of the updates we've gotten already. The Orioles have named their number 5 starter. We got good news on Felix Bautista, but we'll talk through who gets that final bullpen spot. And then on the hitting side, we know the Orioles will be without Gunnar Henderson, who will fill in the roster right there. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So this isn't going to be a, full opening day roster prediction because at this point, I'm recording here on Monday evening, March 24th. We know, I would say 24 of 26 opening day roster spots. And again, maybe not call it evening. I'm recording after 4 p.m. here on Monday. So if you're listening to this, later in the day, Tuesday, watching, and we've gotten more updates from Mike Elias or Brandon Hyde, just remember this is when I'm recording. These things are going to change. They're going to evolve. But I do think we're at 24 out of 26 right now for the Orioles opening day roster. So we'll talk about some of the updates we got over the weekend when I was gone. Hope you enjoyed the episodes that were still posted with the offseason review on Friday, the bold prediction episodes on Monday. Make sure to go back and check those out. If you have not already, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Subscribe wherever you listen. Leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That really, really helps out the show. And thank you for your patience again. You would think, hey, why doesn't Connor already have an episode out about the Orioles re-signing Kyle Gibson to a 1-year deal? Well, as I mentioned last week, and because I kind of banked Friday and Monday's episodes ahead of time, I was out of town for an amazing friend's wedding this weekend. Had an awesome moment of a bunch of University of Maryland grads in the wedding, watching the Dairy Queen buzzer beater in the wedding. And basically the entire wedding party was together to watch that kind of before dinner was served. So that was awesome to see. Shout out to Scott and Sam, and an awesome wedding on Sunday. But I am back as we get closer and closer to opening day. And of course, shout out to Dairy Queen as well. But let's get to an opening day roster prediction. Now, let's start with the pitchers. Remember, 26 players on the opening day roster. You are limited to 13 pitchers. So generally, most teams, including the Orioles, carry 13 position players and 13 pitchers to begin the year. So let's start with the pitching, because the starting rotation at this point is pretty much set. We know who the 5 starters are going to be. We know Zach Eflin will start opening day Thursday in Toronto. We know that Charlie Morton, the Orioles veteran 1-year signing this offseason, will get the Game 2 start on Friday in Toronto. And then we also know part of that rotation will be Dean Kramer and Tomoyuki Sugano. Now, the Blue Jays have named their starters for the entire series. The Orioles have not. We know that Kramer and Sugano will be 3 and 4. We're just not sure what the order will be. So it'll either be Kramer Saturday, Sugano Sunday, or the flip, but they will be 3 and 4 in the rotation. And then the question mark was the 5 spot with Grayson Rodriguez out. We know he will begin the year on the injured list. He continues to throw, was throwing from about 90 feet on the field on Monday. So those are good signs. More on Grayson on tomorrow's episode. But it was down to Cade Povich and Albert Suarez. But the Orioles made the decision officially on Sunday, giving that spot to Cade Povich to be the Orioles' number 5 starter. And the O's confirmed he will start the home opener on Monday against the Red Sox. And this is something that I had talked about over the past couple of weeks, where I thought there was still a good chance the Orioles would give the spot actually to Albert Suarez, just with him being the veteran. But I continue to talk about how Povich getting the 5 spot and Suarez going into the bullpen just makes more sense for this roster. And Povich had done much more this spring to earn that spot, as well as how good he was in September last year and being on the Oriole postseason roster. And all those things came together for Povich to get that spot. We do know Suarez will begin the year in the bullpen as well as expected. And it also gives you your only lefty in the rotation with Povich. The top four are righties. Suarez has that flexibility to pitch out of the pen, can give you length in the bullpen early in the year. Remember, some guys are still kind of fully building up even into late March and April. So you need more long guys in the pen early in the year sometimes than you do in the middle of the season. So having Albert Suarez fully built up as a starter, but immediately going into the bullpen can help cover depth, cover innings, cover you with some length. And I know the Orioles did sign Kyle Gibson to a 1-year, $5+ million deal over the weekend. Full breakdown on that coming up on tomorrow's episode. But Gibson will not be ready to go for opening day. He has been throwing. He's been up to 50+ pitches in some of his outings on his own. But the Orioles want him to get into more game-type scenarios. He will actually stay in Sarasota to continue to build up. They will probably send him at some point to AAA Norfolk on quote-unquote rehab to make some game starts there. And the Orioles basically said their goal is Gibson is ready by May 1st. So you're still going a month plus without Kyle Gibson despite just signing him. So he's not really a factor to begin the year. And those are all the reasons why Cade Povich ended up getting this number 5 spot. So beyond that, it gave us 6 locks in the Oriole bullpen. The O's confirmed that Suarez would begin the year in the pen. So he was one of them as kind of your long man. And then you knew that Sir Anthony Dominguez and Gregory Soto, Yennier Cano, Cionel Perez, and Keegan Aiken are all going to be in that bullpen with him. So it gives you 5 starters and 6 relievers, 2 spots open. One of them was the question of Felix Bautista coming off the Tommy John surgery back in October of 2023. Orioles were slow playing him a bit. He was pitching throughout the spring. The O's said they wanted him to get into 6 or 7 spring games before he was ready. The Orioles were very non-committal for a while. But finally, they did commit on Sunday. Brandon Hyde confirming that Bautista will be on the Orioles opening day roster. Now, to begin the season, and we know this, hearing from Hyde and Elias concerning the Bautista subject, he's not going to be full force Felix Bautista from the go. The Orioles simply aren't going to let him do that. Now, so far this spring, we've seen him touch up to 99, not the usual, up to 102 or sometimes more with his fastball. That'll probably come more as there's more adrenaline in the games that matter. But the O's have told us, hey, Felix is not going to pitch back-to-backs. He's not going to pitch any multi-inning outings early in the season to make sure he is healthy and kind of they can unleash him in the second half to be the full Felix we saw in 2023, who was one of the best relievers, maybe the best reliever in all of Major League Baseball. But it is awesome that they felt he is ready enough to go and come back to the mound. And if the Orioles are in Toronto on Thursday and they're up 6-4 going into the bottom of the 9th inning, I'm pretty sure Felix Bautista will be trotting out of the bullpen for that save chance. And that is just really, really cool to have back on this Oriole team. So he's your 7th reliever. We know the 5 starters. That leaves you 1 bullpen spot for a pitcher remaining on this roster. And there are basically 3 candidates at this point. It's Bryan Baker, Roansy Contreras, and Matt Bowman. 3 right-handed relievers all vying for that final spot. Now, right now, I personally would give the edge to Bryan Baker. I'm unsure how the Orioles are thinking here 2 days from opening day, but I would give the edge to Baker. He's out of options, although to be fair, all 3 of these guys are out of options. But for the first time in Baker's career, he is out of options. He can't just be freely sent to AAA like what the Orioles did with him at the beginning of last year. And listen, they don't want to lose Bryan Baker for nothing. There's a reason, despite, Baker, we know he came to the Orioles in 2022, had a really great season as kind of the 7th inning man in that 2022 great Orioles bullpen. Then he struggled in 23, ended up in AAA for a while, and then he spent most, he only had 23 big league innings last year. He spent most of the season in AAA Norfolk because those struggles with the command continued. But the Orioles still love the stuff. It is dominant stuff, and it's gotten better this spring. His fastball's up to 99. He has a new changeup grip that has changed that pitch and made it better and more controllable for him. And there's a reason why, and a little bit of it is because he had options, so you could stash him in AAA. But when you're a good team, 40-man roster spots are sacred. And for Bryan Baker, who over, let's say, like the second half of 2023 and all of 2024 was really more of a AAA reliever than a big league reliever. Those are guys that generally don't hold on to 40-man roster spots for that long of a time without being a main piece in a big league bullpen. But the fact that the O's did hold on to him for that long, while other guys lost their spot. I mean, think of a player like Dylan Tate, who was just a big a part of the Orioles 2022 bullpen. He was DFA'd in that time, and Bryan Baker was not, even though they were making kind of similar contributions to the big league bullpen. Baker more so than Tate, because Tate was injured for a while. But that tells you how much the Orioles still do believe in Bryan Baker. And with him this spring looking the best he has really since that 2022 season, I don't see the O's losing him for nothing. Now, again, that is losing him for nothing. There's still a chance they could find a place to trade him and open up the spot for someone else. But I can't imagine the Orioles just DFAing Bryan Baker tomorrow and just letting him walk for nothing. Because I will tell you, Rockabaco has already reported multiple teams are kind of checking in about the availability of Bryan Baker, knowing that he's on the roster bubble. If Baker gets DFA'd, I mean, I would be willing to bet a substantial amount of money that another team claims him on waivers and the Orioles lose him for nothing. So that is why I put him at the top of this list. But there is a case for the other two guys. The case for Matt Bowman, the kind of funky, sidewinding right-hander that the Orioles brought in late last year, added to the bullpen. He was a nice reliever for them in September. They brought him back on a minor league deal this offseason, so he was in big league camp. And the way we had talked about Bowman, I kept saying that, he's on a minor league deal, so he could just go directly to AAA. That's why I kept giving the edge to Baker over Bowman for the final roster spot. But as I kept talking about that, I said there could be an opt-out in Matt Bowman's deal. It just no one had reported on the Matt Bowman opt-out. Well, it turns out he did have an opt-out in that contract. It was for Sunday, March 23rd. Basically what that means is if you're a veteran big league player, Bowman's kind of bounced around the big leagues for a few years now, and you've signed a minor league deal, you generally put an opt-out clause into your contract, which is usually somewhere around 4 or 5 days before opening day. And it says, by this point, you have to add me to the 40-man roster and not guarantee, but make it clear that I have a really good chance of making the opening day roster, or I can opt out and just say I'm becoming a free agent and I'm going to open it up to sign with another team who might have a bigger opening for me to get onto their big league roster. And Bowman had that in his contract. So the Orioles on Sunday, to avoid just letting him opt out, they added him to the 40-man roster. Now, it wasn't a huge decision because they had space to do it. They transferred Tyler Wells to the 60-day injured list. Remember, when you're on the 60-day injured list, you don't count towards the 40-man roster. They've already done that with Kyle Bradish earlier this week to get Kyle Gibson onto the 40-man roster. Now they do it with Tyler Wells. Neither of those guys are going to be back in the first 60 days of the season, as we know. So those were two easy moves for the Orioles to make to create 40-man roster space, and they did so for Matt Bowman. Now, the thing to remember is, just because the Orioles did select the contract of Bowman and add him to the 40-man on Sunday, that does not at all guarantee that he is getting that final bullpen spot. It certainly puts him right in the middle of the mix for the Orioles to make that decision, but it's no guarantee. In the next 2 days, they could still DFA Matt Bowman. They could still trade Matt Bowman. They could still put him on the roster. All three things are very much in play. The reason why they added him to the roster at the time they did is because they risked losing him then. They would rather kick that decision down the road a couple of days and have Bowman in their back pocket. Maybe if they're working on a Baker trade and they get it done tomorrow, then they have Bowman here to step up and take that spot, or if there's another injury or whatever it may be. Even if the Orioles feel that Baker has the edge over Bowman, if you have the space on your 40-man, there's no use in letting him walk right now. Keep him around for at least a few more days in case you do need him. And I still like Matt Bowman, and I would love for him to hang around. He could clear waivers if he gets DFA'd. However, if he does, he has the ability to decline an assignment and just become a free agent. So the Orioles would really have to convince him to clear waivers, go to AAA and say, hey, you will be in the big leagues at some point. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then really the final guy is Roansy Contreras, who the Orioles claimed on waivers twice this offseason. They built him up as a starter. The case for him is he's 25, and I think there's still stuff to unlock there, and he could give you another guy with length coming out of your bullpen, which again is really nice to have very early in the season in March and early April. But I just think the way the Orioles look at it, Contreras has been put on waivers so many times that, yeah, another team will probably claim him because they always do. But remember, when the Orioles claimed him, he had to pass through 20-plus teams to get to the Orioles. And when the O's DFA'd him the first time this offseason, he was claimed by the Yankees, which means he passed through, 26, 27 teams to get to the Yankees because the waiver order is reverse order of standings. So if the Orioles think, hey, he passed through 27 teams already, maybe if we're lucky, we could sneak him through all 29 other teams and we could keep him in AAA. I do think Contreras is getting DFA'd, but he is still in that mix, and another guy who could be traded maybe if the Orioles found a spot for him as well, because there's just not space on the roster for him at the moment. Again, I would lean towards Baker, but I would not be surprised if one or even two of these guys is dealt in kind of an interesting deal during this week, so the Orioles at least get something back for them if they are not at least guaranteed to make this opening day roster. So for my final projection, I guess it would be the five starters that we have: Eflin, Morton, Kramer, Sugano, and Povich. The bullpen guys we pretty much know are going to be in there: Dominguez, Soto, Cano, Perez, Aiken, Suarez, and Bautista. And then I would put Bryan Baker in there in the final bullpen spot for my last opening day roster projection. So those are the 13 pitchers. Let's move on to the 13 hitters. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Just Ingredients. When it comes to fueling your body, quality matters. And that's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high-quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF-certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. Just Ingredients has also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper, who trusts their NSF-certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. And really the best part about Just Ingredients is that they prioritize wholesome, nourishing ingredients without any artificial junk. It's a boost you could get after a workout, need an energy boost, whatever it may be. Just Ingredients, it delivers real results. So visit justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow just.ingredients. That is at just.ingredients on Instagram. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When you start using Monarch, you can realize just how much you are spending on like food delivery. Now you can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So in our Orioles 2025 opening day roster prediction 2.0, we move from the pitching side to the hitting side. 13 position players who will make this opening day roster. And at this point, very similar to the pitchers, it's pretty much the 12 spots have been locked up. You got your two catchers at Adley Rutschman and Gary Sanchez. You got 5 infielders locked in right now: Jordan Westberg, Jackson Holliday, and Ramon Arias, and then the 2 first basemen in Ryan Mountcastle and Ryan O'Hearn. And then with Dylan Carlson officially being optioned to AAA Norfolk over the weekend, we pretty much have the 5 outfielders: Cedric Mullins, Colton Cowser, Tyler O'Neill, Heston Kjerstad, and Ramon Laureano. So that leaves 1 hitter spot. And you may be wondering, Connor, where is Gunnar Henderson? Well, that is why there is 1 open spot. Gunnar Henderson, who has been out for a bit after suffering a mild intercostal strain back in February. The Orioles were getting more and more optimistic that he may have a chance to be ready for opening day and avoid an IL stint to begin the season, but he just basically ran out of time. He did not appear in a spring training game. The Orioles didn't even play their exhibition in DC on Monday because of rain, so the spring training games ended on Sunday, and Gunnar just was not able to get back into game action and get those live ABs, and the O said he just ran out of time. So Henderson officially will be beginning the year on the 10-day injured list. Now, the Orioles do have the ability to backdate that IL stint by about 3 days, which is good. And Mike Elias said it's hopefully days and not weeks that Gunnar is out. Elias and Hyde sounded pretty good, pretty optimistic about the fact that it won't be much more than the minimal IL stint for Henderson before he's back at some point in early April into this Orioles lineup, which is certainly a good sign because he is an MVP candidate and the best player on this team. And if the math works out, I believe he can return as early as April 2nd or 3rd. It's either game 2 or 3 of the Red Sox series at home, that Wednesday or Thursday, the second series of the year. It's one of those 2 days would be the first day he is eligible to return. So I believe he would either miss 5 or 6. I think it'll end up being 6 games. I think it's April 3rd is when he could come back. Not really sure how the backdating exactly works at the beginning of the season, but I believe the target date would be April 3rd, final game against the Red Sox. So he would end up missing 6 games before that is being played. So with Gunnar starting the year on the IL, that does leave 1 open spot. And basically there are 3 names in the mix to get the final open spot. And one of them is kind of coming at it from a different angle, because for a while we were down to 2 names. It was basically like, look, and this is something I've talked about throughout the spring since Gunnar suffered the injury. It was like, hey, the Orioles are going to play Jackson Holliday at shortstop. That's what they're going to do. They would put Jordan Westburg and Ramon Arias at second base and third base, kind of move those guys around, put them in the opening day or put them in the starting lineup. And instead of like going to get somebody, they know the Gunnar absence will be fairly short. They will just basically add somebody to the roster who can be a utility bench guy, maybe start 1 time, maybe 2 times, and then Gunnar comes back and that guy goes down to AAA. And they would want someone who can play shortstop, because with Gunnar out, and although Holliday has been a shortstop in the minors, and Westburg used to be a shortstop, and even Arias used to be a shortstop, and technically even Ryan Mountcastle used to be a shortstop, you would like someone who can play shortstop defensively to be on the bench just in case you needed it. And that's why I was basically like, look, it's either going to be Livan Soto or Luis Vazquez to take the spot from Gunnar until he is ready. But that was because all we had heard is that Jorge Mateo is just not going to be ready for opening day. He's going to start the year on the IL. He got Tommy John surgery on his non-throwing elbow back in August. The Orioles liked his progress, but Elias and Hyde have said multiple times throughout the offseason and spring training, very, very doubtful for Mateo to be ready for opening day. But all of a sudden, we get to like last week, and we're hearing things like Mateo might actually get himself ready. Now, the team has left Florida, and Jorge Mateo has not. Him and Gunnar Henderson are remaining in Sarasota to take live at-bats. Gunnar to continue to get himself ready, and Mateo to try and get himself ready. The Orioles have said that Jorge Mateo is going to take those at-bats, and Brandon Hyde said on either Sunday or Monday that it's basically going to be about how Mateo feels, A, and B, if his body is getting into the groove in terms of these baseball action. Now, Mateo did play in a good chunk of spring training games over the final week of spring. That's all good signs for him being ready. He was throwing, he was running, he was swinging. Those are all good things. He just needs to feel right and ready to go. So if Mateo feels right, he's going to be the guy. He's going to continue to take at-bats in Sarasota this week while the rest of the team has already flown north. They were in D.C. on Monday. That game got canceled. Now they head up to Toronto probably on Tuesday or Wednesday. But Mateo's going to hang back, and probably they'll make a decision by Wednesday if Mateo is truly ready. If he feels ready, they're going to fly Mateo to Toronto, and they're going to activate him, and he is going to be that utility infielder backup shortstop on the opening day roster. Now, he still isn't going to play a whole lot, I don't think, but it's nice to have a more veteran guy in that spot who's been on your roster for a long time. The big question with Mateo is, if he's the selection, what in the world do the Orioles do when Gunnar comes back? Because if it's Soto or Vazquez, you just option them to AAA and you give it to Gunnar and you go ahead. This is something I've talked about a couple of times on the show. If everybody's healthy and producing that's on this roster, that's 14 hitters for 13 spots. And I feel that Jorge Mateo himself might be the odd man out. So it would be nice for Mateo to get this chance for a week or so with Gunnar out to just be on the roster and get some ABs and see what he looks like. But then say it is, the first week of April, Gunnar's ready to go. Your other options besides DFAing somebody are sending Jackson Holliday or Heston Kjerstad down to AAA. I don't think the Orioles want to do that anymore. And then your DFA options would be Ramon Arias, and I'd rather have him than Jorge Mateo. And then Ramon Laureano, who they signed him to a $5 million deal, $4 million deal. Like, I think they'd rather have him than Jorge Mateo on this roster, even though Mateo showed he can play some outfield. So I'm just really intrigued to see how all this Jorge Mateo stuff stacks up. Now, if Mateo's not ready, again, it's either Livan Soto or Luis Vazquez. Soto, left-handed hitter, utility guy, could play second, third, short, play the outfield. Spent pretty much all of September on the Orioles roster last year, although he didn't play a whole lot. He was clearly a bench guy. But the O's really like him as depth. They brought him in 3 different times to the roster over the past year. He provides a left-handed bat to you with Gunnar, a lefty, being out, and it balances your 4 infielders, right? You have Soto and Holiday as lefties, Arias and Westberg as righties, and he just gives you that versatile infield defender and just has more MLB experience than Luis Vazquez. Soto debuted all the way back in 2022 with the Angels, and he has options and you won't lose him. Case for Luis Vazquez is the better defensive shortstop than Livan Soto. Soto's a solid defender and can play the outfield. Vazquez can play third, short, and second, but cannot play the outfield. But he is a better pure defensive shortstop. He has put on a show defensively at short and also at third and second so far this spring. So that would be nice to have that with Gunnar out. And that feels like the main goal, right? If you're really just missing Gunnar for a week or 10 days, is to have a guy who just plays a really good shortstop if you need him. And he's also a right-handed bat, so while that would throw off the balance a bit, if you did ever want to sit one of Westberg, Arias, or Holiday, it might be sitting Holiday against a lefty or two. And if you did that, right, you're going to see at least, you won't see a lefty in the Blue Jays, but you'll probably see a lefty, Garrett Crochet, against the Red Sox. If you want to sit Holiday against him, you'd rather be able to put in a right-handed bat in Vazquez rather than a left-handed bat in Soto in his place in the lineup. Both players have options. Neither is on the 40-man roster, so they'd have to figure that out. Both were good in spring. Soto had an OPS over 900. Vazquez had an OPS around 800. Like, both performed well, which was really nice to see. I do think if Mateo's not ready, the Orioles are going to give the job to Livan Soto. Hyde speaks just so highly of him. They brought him in 3 times last year. They carried him on the roster late last season. The Orioles really like Livan Soto. I think he will get the role. But if Mateo feels good, they're going to give the spot to Jorge Mateo. And then, honestly, that's something we'll continue to talk about. Because if Mateo gets the spot and then a week passes and Gunnar's ready to come off the IL and start his year, I personally would DFA Mateo. But I don't know if the Orioles want to do that. So I am very intrigued to see what they would do there. We will certainly talk about it more. So the official prediction is Rutschman, Sanchez, Westberg, Holiday, Arias, Mountcastle, O'Hearn, Mullins, Cowser, O'Neill, Kerstad, Laureano, and then I will predict that it is Livan Soto. I'll predict that Mateo doesn't get to the point where he's ready. He starts the year on the IL. The Orioles kick that can down the road, and Livan Soto gets that final opening day spot. So we know the players I've projected. We know no matter what, 24 of the 26 players. Now we talk about, okay, what will the lineup look like? We know what the rotation is going to look like. What will the Orioles' batting order, defensive positioning, all that good stuff look like as they begin that season? We'll get to that to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything, from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. Now, I had my eye on a few underdogs to begin this tournament, a few Cinderellas, but really that hasn't happened. The lowest seed is 10 seed Arkansas that's made it into the Sweet 16 on the men's side. And I believe it's the first time in over 15 years that a seed 11 or lower has not been in the Sweet 16. And that's all thanks to Derek Queen. There was almost 12 seed Colorado State there. And then DQ himself, with the confidence from Baltimore, got the Terps into the Sweet 16. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use. And when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So we will finish things up by looking at who's going to be sent out there in this Orioles lineup. What is it going to look like when the Orioles do begin to take the field later this week on Thursday and beyond? Because I am definitely intrigued on what the Orioles are going to send out there for a lineup. Now, Jose Barrios, the veteran right-hander, is getting the start for the Toronto Blue Jays on Thursday on opening day. In fact, all 4 starters the Orioles will see over the weekend in the 4-game series in Toronto will be right-handers. Jose Barrios, Kevin Gausman, Max Scherzer, and Chris Bassett will be the 4 that will go for Toronto. So they will not see a lefty. In fact, they will most likely only see one lefty in the first 2 series. They will probably see next Wednesday against the Red Sox, they will see the lefty Garrett Crochet, but he's the only lefty in the Red Sox rotation. The Blue Jays don't have a lefty in their rotation. Now, when they go to Kansas City, they might end up seeing Cole Reagans potentially. It'll be kind of interesting after that how the Orioles see some lefty, but it's going to be a lot of righties to begin the year. And when the Orioles do begin the year against a righty, it could look similar to what the lineup the Orioles put out on Monday in DC in the exhibition game that ended up not getting played because of rain. But here is my projection for what at least I think this lineup is going to look like. Again, this could certainly change for the Orioles, but I do think Colton Cowser is going to lead off without Gunnar Henderson in there. As soon as Gunnar comes back, I think he's going to go at least against righties right back into that leadoff spot. But I think Colton Cowser gets the nod in the leadoff spot. And if you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, I just threw up a little screenshot of my projected lineup for opening day. It's Cowser in left field leading off. It's Adley catching and hitting second. It's Ryan O'Hearn hitting third as the DH. Tyler O'Neill in right field is hitting fourth. Jordan Westburg at third base hitting fifth. Cedric Mullins in center batting sixth. Ryan Mountcastle at first base hitting seventh. Jackson Holliday at shortstop batting eighth, and then Ramon Arias playing second base and hitting ninth. Gives you some good balance. You have 2 righties in a row once with O'Neill and Westburg, 4 and 5. Otherwise, in the entire lineup, you won't get back-to-back same-handed hitters. That makes it really hard for an opposing manager to mix and match with a bullpen and get good matchups at the end of the game, which is really nice for the Orioles. It also allows you with this lineup, if you have a lefty come in, you have Laureano and Sanchez, who you could potentially bring off the bench. You can deploy Heston Kjerstad as a pinch hitter off the bench in this lineup at any point. And again, I know it's probably a little frustrating that Kjerstad is not in the projected opening day lineup. He's going to play a lot. I just think the Orioles are going to want to get Tyler O'Neill in that lineup to start. I mean, for Heston's at-bats, it's going to be days where either Mountcastle or O'Neill sit against right-handed starters, and that will happen in at least 1 and probably 2 of the 4-game series in Toronto this weekend. But you want Tyler O'Neill in there because, A, he's your big 3-year signing of the offseason. You're going to start him on opening day. And remember, Tyler O'Neill currently has a major league record. He has homered in 5 consecutive opening days. You got to count on him to be able to do that again. And then, yeah, Ryan Mountcastle may sit against some righties, but you don't want to sit Ryan Mountcastle in Toronto. That is where he does his most damage. So he's going to be in there. O'Neill's going to be in there on opening day. And then throughout the weekend, Kjerstad will mix in against some of the right-handed pitchers that the Blue Jays have, and they'll kind of mix those guys in throughout the season. Now, in terms of what the Orioles will do against lefties, again, they will not see one until most likely their 6th game of the year. That's the 2nd game of the series against the Red Sox, when their new lefty Garrett Crochet will most likely take the mound next Wednesday at Oriole Park. In terms of what they will do there, again, Gunnar is not there in the lineup. He probably won't be able to be back by then. I think the day after that is when Gunnar would be eligible to return. So because of that, you wouldn't have Gunnar. So again, if you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, you can see my projected lineup here for the Orioles against lefties. I think Jordan Westburg would lead off against lefties and play third base. And then Adley, you would still want in there, but you'd probably DH him against some left-handers hitting second. Then this is the lineup with Gunnar Henderson in it for the Orioles against the left-handers, but I'll pull up the one without. See, sometimes, I don't have a producer, and I myself am the producer of this podcast, so we'll get that new lineup up there in just a moment. But either way, they're only going to face one lefty with Gunnar Henderson out. Once he comes back, I do think they're actually going to put him in the 3-hole here against lefties and just have him hit leadoff against righties. But here's the one I've got as you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. With Gunnar out, Westburg at third base leading off, Rutschman DHing hitting second, Tyler O'Neill, second best hitter in baseball behind Aaron Judge against lefties last year. He's in right field hitting third. Ryan Mountcastle matches lefties. He's hitting fourth at first base. Then you get Colton Cowser still in there. You move him down the lineup to fifth. He plays center field with Mullins sitting against lefties. Then you get Ramon Arias up in the lineup because he hit so well against lefties last year at second base hitting sixth. Against lefties is your chance to get Gary Sanchez in there as the catcher. He hit seventh. Ramon Laureano was great against left-handers last year. He hits eighth in left field. And then if it's Livan Soto on the opening day roster. I am definitely putting Jackson Holiday. Just you hit him ninth against the lefties and he plays shortstop. But if Mateo's in there, I actually think there's a good chance, at least early in the year, Mateo gets that start at short, hitting ninth. He's still a guy who, despite the struggles last year, had a 120 plus WRC plus against left-handers. So if you're going to put him on the team, you might as well start him in this spot. So that's how I would kind of throw in Mateo if he is on the roster. But that's how I would split up the lineups. We will see what the Orioles want to do. We will certainly see further updates on Gunnar, on Mateo, on what they want to do with this final bullpen spot. I mean, heck, they could even make a separate trade. Instead of going Contreras, Baker, or Bowman, there's a bunch of guys getting released, opting out, going on waivers this week. This is how the Orioles got Danny Coulomb a couple of years ago. They could certainly make another move like that, and we'll certainly have you updated on it. But a move they did make over the weekend that we haven't talked about much is signing Kyle Gibson. The O's brought him back on a one-year deal. I'll break all that down on tomorrow's episode, plus go into some of the other injury updates we got from the Orioles on Samuel Basallo, Chase McDermott, on Trevor Rogers, and many, many more. That's coming up on tomorrow's show, which will be one day until opening day when we join us back here tomorrow. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.